Good evening, my name is Tiffany Polk. It's September 16th, and I will be working on my lab video for week 2 on cells and tissues. Tissues are held together by cell junctions. Tissues are a group of cells that make up organs and other body parts. There are 4 main types of tissues: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. Each is made of specialized cells that are grouped together according to structure and function. The first type of tissue that I will discuss is the epithelial tissue, also referred to as epithelium. It protects the body by forming a layer of cells that acts as a barrier between internal and external environments. It lines the internal cavities and passageways and forms certain glands. An example of epithelial tissues includes skin and the lining of the respiratory system. All epithelial cells are connected to one another and to the underlying tissues by a matrix called the basal lamina, also known as the basement membrane. The basement membrane connects epithelial cells, such as epidermis of the skin, to the underlying tissues. Between epithelial cells, there are either leaky or tight junctions. Tight junctions allow for free movement of substance from one side of the epithelium to another, such as water or ions. An example of a leaky junction is between the cells of a capillary. Tight junctions create a barrier between epithelial cells to keep unwanted substance out. In order for substance to pass through the epithelium with tight junctions, they must pass through the cells themselves. An example of a tissue with tight junction is the lining of the digestive tract. Epithelial tissues also consist of different types. Tissues or structures are based on their functions. Some epithelial tissues may have just one layer, simple epithelial tissue, and some may have many layers, stratified epithelial tissues. The shapes of the epithelial cells also vary. Some are flat, known as squamous. Others are cube-shaped, known as cuboidal, or column-shaped, known as columnar. Transitional epithelium consists of multiple layers of epithelial cells that can be contracted or expanded, such as in the uterus or the bladder. Now, type 2 of connective tissues. Another category of tissues in the human body is connective tissues. Connective tissues support for internal tissues and organs. Connective tissues is characterized by its extensive extracellular matrix, which consists of water, protein fibers, and proteoglycans. Connective tissues may be described as fixed, which means they don't move, or mobile, which flows around the body. Most connective tissues are fixed. Types of connective tissues include loose connective tissues, dense connective tissues, adipose tissues, blood, and supporting connective tissues. The elastic loose connective tissues lie under the skin and are also found around small glands. Dense connective tissues are elastic and strong and include tendons, ligaments, and the tissues that cover muscles and nerves. Adipose tissues consist mainly of fat and liquid, from which occupies most of the cell volume. Most of the adipose tissues in adults are white fat. Brown fat is adipose tissue that helps regulate temperature in infants. Blood is mobile connective tissue that includes extensive extracellular matrix called plasma. And then you have supporting connective tissue, which includes cartilage and bone. Cartilage does not have a direct blood supply, but through its extracellular matrix, nutrients can diffuse into the cells. Now on to our third type of tissues, known as muscles. Muscle tissues is characterized by properties that allow movement. Muscle cells are excitable. They respond to stimulus. They are contractile, meaning they can be shortened and generate a pulling force. When attached between two movable objects, in other words, bones, contractions of the muscle cause the bones to move. Some movement is voluntary and some movements are involuntary. There are 3 types of muscles according to their structure and function: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. So skeletal, the histology of that is long, striated fibers. The function of skeletal is voluntary movement. It produces heat and protects organs. The location of skeletal are attached to bones and around the entrance points to the body. So like an example would be the mouth and the anus. Cardiac histology is short, branched, striated, single central nucleus. The function is it contracts to pump blood, and the location is the heart. Then you have smooth. The histology is short, spindle-shaped, no evidence of striations, single nucleus in each fiber. The function is involuntary movement. It moves food, involuntary control of respiration, moves secretion, regulates flow of blood in arteries by contraction. The location is walls of major organs and passageways. The last and final tissue that we will talk about today is the nervous tissue. The most prominent cell of the nervous tissue, the neuron, is characterized mainly by its ability to receive stimuli and respond by generating electrical signal, known as the action potential, which can travel rapidly over great distances in the body. A typical neuron displays a distinctive morphology, a large cell body branched out into short extensions called dendrites, which receive chemical signals from other neurons, and a long tail called the axon, which relays signals away from the cell to other neurons, muscles, or glands. Many axons wrapped by a myelin sheet and a lipid derivative that acts as an insulator and speeds up the transmission of the action potential. That concludes my video. I hope you learned something about tissues and their functions and their locations and what they do. Thank you, and you have a good night.